The rain had been coming down hard all morning in Manhattan, the kind that streaked the tall glass windows of high-rise towers and made the city feel as though it had been dipped in steel and silver. Inside the shimmering heart of Midtown, the top floors of the Bellington building housed the corporate empire of Vincent Harlow, CEO of Harlow International. A man whose name made stock tickers jump and reporters sharpen their pens. Vincent himself was as cold and calculated as the city skyline. Mid-40s, sharp jawline, hair perfectly parted, his tailored suits whispering Italian craftsmanship with every move. His office wasn't just an office, it was a cathedral of success, perched so high above the city that the streets below seemed almost irrelevant. A long mahogany table stretched across the conference room, with chess pieces waiting. At the far end, like soldiers frozen in formation, the chessboard wasn't just for show. To Vincent, it was a symbol of strategy, of dominance, of control. In business meetings, he would occasionally move a piece to punctuate a point, his opponents too intimidated to question it. No one ever dared to challenge him to a real game. No. One except for this morning's guest. The idea hadn't even been his. It was his executive assistant Marcus, who had casually mentioned it during a weekly briefing. The new maid downstairs, what's her name again? Althea, she keeps humming while cleaning the lobby, real calm, like nothing rattles her. Security joked she's like some Zen master. Someone said she even plays chess. You should invite her up one day, boss. Vincent had smirked at the suggestion. A maid, in his glass fortress of corporate power, playing chess? The thought amused him in a way little else did these days. He hadn't smiled genuinely in years, but that morning, the corner of his mouth lifted. Bring her up, he said, tapping a knight on the board. Let's see if she knows what these pieces even do. Althea Johnson was 31, though she carried herself with the kind of resilience that belonged to someone twice her age. Her skin was deep mahogany, her hair tucked beneath a simple scarf, and her uniform was a pressed Navy maid's dress that the hotel downstairs required. She had only been in New York for 6 months, having moved up from Atlanta after her mother passed. Her days were long, often starting before sunrise and ending long after the city's nightlife roared awake. That morning, she had been polishing the marble in the lobby, earbuds tucked away. When Marcus approached her, "Mr. Harlow wants to see you," he said. She frowned, standing upright with the rag still in her hand. See me? For what? Did I do something wrong? No, Marcus said, suppressing a grin. He wants to play chess with you. Althea laughed before she could stop herself, a warm, unguarded laugh that filled the lobby. Chess with the CEO? Marcus shrugged. He's in one of his moods. Humor him. Her instinct told her it was a setup, some kind of joke at her expense. People like Vincent Harlow didn't invite people like her upstairs for genuine reasons. But she also knew how rumors traveled in a building like this, and how quickly jobs disappeared when pride got in the way. With a silent prayer to her mama, she tucked the rag in her cleaning cart and followed Marcus to the private elevator. The ride up was smooth, silent, and tense. She caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. Simple uniform, scuffed shoes, tired eyes. She straightened her back anyway, trying to summon the same quiet strength her mother always told her she had. When the elevator doors slid open, she stepped into a world that looked nothing like hers. Glass walls stretched to the ceiling, art worth more than her yearly salary hung like casual decoration, and the city skyline sprawled beneath them like a conquered kingdom. Vincent Harlow was already waiting by the chessboard. So this is the famous Althea, he said, his voice smooth but carrying that undertone of command that made men twice his size shrink. Sir, she said politely, folding her hands. I don't know about famous. He gestured to the seat opposite him. Sit. The board gleamed between them, every piece hand-carved, heavy with polish. Althea sat cautiously, her hands in her lap. You know how to play? Vincent asked, his tone lightly mocking. I know a little. she said carefully. Good, he said, moving his white pawn forward 2 squares. Then show me. Althea's eyes flicked over the board. She hadn't played in months. Not since those evenings back in Atlanta when her mother would sit across from her at the kitchen table, sipping tea and reminding her to see the whole board, not just the next move. She reached forward and moved her pawn, her fingers steady even as her pulse quickened. At first, Vincent toyed with her, making bold, aggressive moves, his confidence evident. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over the backrest, eyes gleaming with the amusement of a man who believed he was untouchable. You know, he said casually, chess is a lot like business. You dominate the board, control every piece. Never let your opponent think they have a chance. Althea didn't respond. She simply made her move, calm, deliberate. Of course, some people never rise above pawns, he added, his eyes flicking toward her uniform. This time, she looked up at him. Her gaze wasn't sharp, wasn't angry, it was steady. And in that silence, Vincent felt something he hadn't expected. The faintest trace of discomfort, by the 10th move. Vincent noticed something else. She wasn't just playing. She was setting traps, tiny ones. Moves that looked harmless until you realized too late what they were building toward. His brows furrowed slightly. Althea's face, on the other hand, remained serene. She tilted her head, studied the board, and moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. You said it's like business, she murmured finally, her voice quiet but carrying. But I think it's more like life. Sometimes the pawns surprise you. Vincent's smirk faltered. The conference room began to fill as word spread. A few junior executives paused outside the glass walls, pretending to check their phones while sneaking glances inside. It wasn't every day the boss entertained someone from below the ranks. By the 20th move, there were a dozen silent onlookers, the tension in the air growing with every piece removed from the board. Vincent leaned forward now, his confidence tightening into focus. For the first time in years, someone had pulled him into a game where he couldn't see 10 moves ahead. You're better than you look, he said, almost grudgingly. Althea didn't look up. Most people are. A ripple of whispers spread outside the glass, executives exchanging startled looks. And then it happened. On the 32nd move, Vincent lifted his queen with a sharp flourish, aiming to corner her bishop. But before he could even finish setting it down, Althea's hand moved with quiet certainty. She slid her knight across the board, landing it with a gentle click that echoed in the hushed room. Checkmate, she said softly. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. The silence was absolute. Vincent froze, staring at the board as though the pieces had betrayed him. The onlookers outside the glass doors gaped, their eyes wide. Marcus, still standing near the entrance, was the first to let out a muffled laugh he quickly disguised as a cough. Althea sat back in her chair, her expression calm, almost gentle, as though she hadn't just shattered the ego of one of the most powerful men in New York. You, Vincent started, but the word broke off. He cleared his throat. You got lucky. Althea shook her head, her voice steady. Luck doesn't last 30 moves, sir. That night, Vincent couldn't sleep. He lay in his penthouse apartment, staring at the ceiling while the storm outside battered the city. He replayed the game over and over in his mind, searching for the moment he lost control. It wasn't supposed to matter. She was just a maid. This was supposed to be a joke. But somehow, in the span of an hour, she had turned the board and him inside out. And deep down, beneath the layers of pride and denial, something stirred. Something he hadn't felt in years, curiosity. Vincent Harlow arrived at his office the next morning earlier than usual. The sky outside was pale gray, streaked with the fading remnants of the storm, and for once he didn't bother to check the latest market reports the second he walked in. His mind wasn't on stocks or mergers. It was on the game, The board still sat in the corner of the conference room, exactly as they had left it. Her knight, that damned knight, was still positioned like a quiet assassin, pinning his king. With mathematical certainty. He hadn't touched a single piece since. His assistant, Marcus, entered with a cup of black coffee. "Morning, boss." "You're in early." Vincent didn't glance up. He was staring at the board. "You ever notice," Vincent said slowly, "how one mistake can unravel everything? You think you're ahead, you think you've got control, and then bam, one piece moves, and it all collapses." Marcus eyed the chessboard. He hesitated, then said lightly, "You talking about business? Or yesterday's match?" Vincent finally turned, his eyes narrowing. "Match?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Sir, half the office saw her beat you. They're still whispering about it. People love seeing Goliath get knocked down a peg." The CEO's jaw tightened. "She didn't knock me down." "Of course not," Marcus said diplomatically. But his smirk lingered. Vincent looked back at the board. For a man who prided himself on being in control, the memory of losing gnawed at him like a splinter under the skin. He couldn't let it go. Meanwhile, downstairs, Althea was back to polishing marble floors and scrubbing glass doors, as though yesterday hadn't happened at all. She hummed while she worked, her voice low and warm, filling the echoing spaces of the lobby. The security guards teased her gently as she passed. "Hey, chess queen," one of them said, grinning. "Heard you made the boss sweat yesterday," Althea chuckled. "Don't start rumors. I just played a game." But inside, she felt something shift. She wasn't used to attention. Her life had been about keeping her head down, working hard, staying invisible. Yet now strangers were smiling at her with a respect she didn't quite know what to do with. It felt good, but dangerous. That afternoon the call came again. Marcus appeared in the lobby, hands tucked in his suit pockets. "Boss wants to see you again." Althea's stomach tightened. "For another game?" Marcus gave her a knowing look. "What do you think?" This time, Vincent was waiting with the board already reset. "You got lucky yesterday," he said the moment she stepped in. "I don't like leaving things unfinished." "Sit." She hesitated. "Sir, with all respect, I'm not sure this is a good idea." His eyes hardened. "Do you work in this building?" "Yes." "Then you'll sit." Althea bit back the retort rising in her throat. She sat. The second game began, and this time Vincent came in ruthless. No mocking comments. No arrogance. He played sharp, clean, aggressive. His jaw was set, his eyes locked on the board, but Althea was no less calm than before. Her moves were deliberate, her breathing steady. "You play like you've studied this," Vincent muttered after a while. "My mama taught me," she said. Softly, she said, "Life will try to box you in. But chess teaches you there's always another move if you're willing to see it." The words unsettled him more than he cared to admit. By the 35th move, he realized with a cold dread he was cornered again. "Check," Althea said, her voice almost apologetic. Vincent stared at the board, searching desperately for an out. There wasn't one. "Checkmate." The words sliced the silence. This time, Vincent slammed his palm on the table so hard the pieces rattled. Outside, executives froze at the sound. Althea flinched but didn't move. "You set me up," he snapped. She blinked. "Sir, it's just a game." No, it's not just a game. You don't just walk in here and—" He cut himself off, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling with a fury he couldn't quite control. Althea met his glare with quiet composure. "Maybe it bothers you because you're not used to losing." The room went silent. Vincent's eyes burned into hers, but in that unflinching gaze he saw something he hadn't seen in years. Someone not afraid of him. It shook him to his core. After she left, Vincent poured himself a glass of scotch even though it wasn't yet 5 o'clock. He stared out at the city, watching the tiny dots of traffic below, his mind in chaos. Why did it matter? Why did this one woman, this maid, occupy his thoughts like a storm cloud? Because she saw him. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, not the man who always won. She saw past all that. And she wasn't afraid to challenge him. That night, sleep eluded him again. Over the next week, it became a strange ritual. Vincent would summon Althea under the guise of another match. Each time the executives whispered, the staff exchanged looks, and the tension in the building grew thicker. He lost every time. Sometimes he came close. Sometimes he thought he had her cornered. But in the end, she always found that one move he hadn't seen. And each time, his frustration grew. Not just with the board, but with himself. Because every game revealed something uglier. That maybe his need for control was nothing more than fear dressed in Armani. One late evening, after another match ended with her quiet declaration of checkmate, Vincent didn't clear the board. He just sat there, staring at the pieces, his hand motionless on the table. "You ever lose?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. Althea tilted her head. "Of course, not to me," she smiled faintly. "Everyone loses, sir. That's how you learn." The words landed heavier than she intended. Vincent looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, not the uniform, not the role she played in his building, but her. A woman with quiet strength and eyes that carried more wisdom than his entire boardroom combined. He swallowed. "What are you doing cleaning floors?" She shifted, uncomfortable. "It's a job. Pays the bills." "You're wasting your mind down there." She lifted her chin. "Sometimes life doesn't care about your mind. It just cares if you can survive." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the air felt charged, unspoken truths pressing at the edges. Vincent quickly broke the gaze, pouring himself water, though his throat was already dry. The whispers in the building grew louder. Executives began speculating about why the CEO spent so much time with a maid. Some laughed about it. Others looked uneasy. One evening, as Althea returned to the lobby, two secretaries passed by whispering, loud enough for her to hear, "Must be nice catching the boss's eye. She probably thinks she's special. Just wait until he's bored." Althea kept walking, her face expressionless, but the words burned. She hadn't asked for this attention. She hadn't asked to be dragged into the games of powerful men, yet she couldn't deny it. Part of her liked beating him. Not because it humiliated him, but because it reminded her that even in a world built to keep her invisible, she could still be seen. The breaking point came at the end of their 7th game. It had been a brutal match, Vincent pushing harder than ever, sweat beading at his temples. But once again, she cornered him. Checkmate. This time he didn't slam the table, he didn't rage. He just sat back, staring at her in silence. Then, with a slow, measured voice, he said, "Play me again tomorrow, but not here." She frowned. "Where?" He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "At my penthouse. 8 o'clock. Althea froze. The request hung heavy between them, laced with implication. Her chest tightened. "Sir, I don't think that's appropriate." Vincent's eyes didn't waver. "It's not what you think. I want to understand how you see the board. No distractions. Just you and me, one game." Her instincts screamed at her to say no. But something in his tone, a rawness she hadn't heard before, made her hesitate. She nodded slowly. One game. That night, as she lay in her small apartment in Harlem, Althea stared at the ceiling, restless. She thought of her mama's voice, telling her to trust her instincts. Was she walking into something dangerous? Or was this a chance to step into a world that had always been closed to her? She didn't know, but she knew one thing. Tomorrow night, nothing would ever be the same. The elevator hummed softly as it carried Althea upward, higher and higher past the shimmering floors of Manhattan's elite. She clutched her worn handbag against her side, trying to steady her breath. She'd put on her plainest dress, navy blue, knee-length, clean but simple. Her hair, usually tied in a work scarf, fell loosely around her shoulders. She wanted to look respectful, but not like she was trying too hard. When the doors slid open, the sight stole her breath. Vincent's penthouse wasn't an apartment, it was a palace suspended in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, revealing a glittering panorama of the city at night. The skyline sparkled like a sea of diamonds, yellow and white lights twinkling beneath a velvet sky. Inside, sleek furniture gleamed under soft lighting, modern art pieces hung like trophies, and a grand piano sat untouched in one corner. Vincent stood by a long glass dining table. The chessboard waited at the center, its pieces already arranged, gleaming beneath a crystal chandelier. "You're on time," he said, his voice lower than usual, stripped of its usual bravado. "I said I'd come," Althea replied simply. He gestured to the table. "Sit, let's play." The atmosphere was different here. No executives whispering outside glass walls, no staff pretending not to stare. Just the two of them, the clinking of pieces, and the quiet hum of the city beyond. The glass. Vincent opened strong, his moves precise, his posture tense. But Althea noticed something. He wasn't playing to win this time, he was studying her. Watching how her eyes flicked over the board, how her fingers hovered before making a move, how she sat back and breathed between decisions. "You see the board differently," he said at one point, his voice thoughtful. "Not like the analysts I've played before, not like me. Everyone sees it differently," she murmured, sliding her bishop forward. "Depends on what you've lived through." He tilted his head. "And what have you lived through, Althea?" Her hand paused on the table. The question was too intimate, too direct. She considered brushing it off, but something in his gaze told her he wasn't mocking this time. He genuinely wanted to know. She met his eyes. "Loss, hard work, a lot of doors closed in my face." She moved her piece with a sharp click, "and learning how to survive anyway." Silence stretched. Vincent's throat tightened. For all his billions, all his victories, he realized he'd never spoken with someone who cut through the noise so simply. The game grew tense. Pieces fell one by one, the balance tilting back and forth. Vincent leaned forward, elbows on the table, his jaw clenched in concentration. For the first time, Althea struggled. His moves were sharper tonight, more disciplined. He wasn't playing with pride anymore. He was playing with hunger. And then after nearly 2 hours he cornered her. "Check," he said softly, his queen gleaming in the overhead light. Althea's brows knitted. She scanned the board, searching, weighing, calculating. Her pulse quickened. For the first time since they'd begun this strange rivalry, she realized she might lose. Vincent's lips curved faintly, not in arrogance but in something closer to anticipation. He wanted her best. She took a long breath, recalling her mama's voice. "Don't just look at what's in front of you. Look at what's hiding in the shadows." Her eyes flicked to the knight sitting near the edge of the board, forgotten until now. Slowly, carefully, she moved it forward. The click echoed. Vincent froze. She whispered, almost apologetically, "Checkmate." He stared. His queen, his powerful, dominant queen, was suddenly useless. The trap had been laid 4 moves back, subtle and patient, and he'd walked right into it. The silence stretched, heavy and raw. Finally, Vincent leaned back and laughed. Not a mocking laugh, not bitter, a real laugh. The kind he hadn't let out in years. "You're unbelievable," he said, shaking his head. Althea smiled faintly, though her chest still pounded. "You almost had me." He leaned forward again, his eyes locking on hers. "But I didn't." Their gazes held, the air charged with something unspoken. The city lights glimmered around them, and for a moment, the whole world felt suspended. On that board. Later, they sat by the wide windows with glasses of water, the chessboard abandoned. Vincent looked out over the city, his tone softer than she'd ever heard it. You know, when I was a kid, I played chess to escape. My father was ruthless. He'd tear me apart if I made the wrong move in life, in school, on the board. Beating him was the only way I could feel safe, strong. Althea listened quietly. She'd never imagined this man, this billionaire, speaking of childhood fear. And now? She asked. He gave a humorless smile. Now I don't know if I'm playing to win, or just playing not to lose. Althea studied him. Beneath the polished suit, beneath the power and wealth, she saw a man trapped in a cage he built himself. A cage of pride, control, and fear. You can't control everything, she said gently. Not the board, not life. Sometimes you just have to accept being vulnerable. The words hit him harder than he expected. Vulnerable. It wasn't a word anyone dared use around Vincent Harlow. But from her lips, it didn't sound like weakness. It sounded like freedom. The clock ticked past midnight before Althea finally stood to leave. Vincent walked her to the door, something strange flickering in his chest as he watched her step into the private elevator. When the doors slid shut, he stood there in the silence of his penthouse, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like peace. It felt like loss. The following days brought ripples through the company. Whispers turned into open gossip. Executives questioned why the CEO was spending so much time with the help. Some framed it as a scandal waiting to happen. Others as a distraction. At a board meeting, one senior partner even said bluntly, "Vincent, this fixation you have, it's making people nervous. You're losing credibility." Vincent's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. But that night, staring at his reflection in the dark glass of his office window, the question gnawed at him. Was he? Was he letting a maid unravel his empire? Althea felt the weight of the gossip too. In the lobby, co-workers gave her sidelong glances. Some smirked, some sneered. A few muttered crude comments when they thought she couldn't hear. But when she closed her eyes at night, she didn't see their faces. She saw the board. The way Vincent's mask slipped each time she checkmated him. The way his laugh sounded in that penthouse, raw and unguarded. She hated herself for thinking about it, for feeling something stir when she remembered the way he looked at her, not with pity, not with arrogance, but with respect. But respect didn't pay rent. And respect didn't silence rumors. She told herself she had to end this. One evening, after another long day, Vincent summoned her again. But when she entered his office this time, she didn't sit. "Mr. Harlow," she said firmly, "I can't keep doing this." He looked up, startled. "Doing what?" "These games, these invitations. People are talking. And I didn't come here to play chess with CEOs. I came here to work." For the first time, she saw something flicker across his face. Fear. Not of losing a game. Fear of losing her. "Let them talk," he said quietly. "I don't care what they think." "Well, I do," she shot back. "I've worked too hard to build a life here. I can't throw it away because people think I'm some kind of joke." The word cut him deeper than she realized. Joke. That's what this had started as. And now, it was the farthest thing from a joke. He stood slowly, his voice steady, but urgent. "Althea, you're not a joke. You're the first person in years who's ever challenged me. The first person who's ever made me question myself. You're not a distraction, you're—" He stopped, unable to finish. Althea swallowed hard, her pulse racing. The air between them felt heavy, dangerous, charged. She shook her head. "I can't." And she turned, walking out before he could say another word. That night, Vincent sat alone in his penthouse, the chessboard untouched before him. For the first time, the pieces didn't look like soldiers. They looked like ghosts. He realized then he wasn't losing at chess. He was losing her, and he didn't know how to win her back. The days that followed were some of the longest in Vincent Harlow's career. The board meetings dragged. The numbers, once his lifeblood, blurred together like meaningless codes. Even the stock tickers flashing green across his screens failed to stir that old thrill in his chest. Every victory felt hollow because every night, when the city fell quiet, he found himself staring at the chessboard in his penthouse, waiting for the sound of her voice. Waiting for the soft but certain click of her piece sliding across the board, sealing his fate. But the chair across from him remained empty. Althea, meanwhile, tried to bury herself in work. She scrubbed marble floors, dusted crystal chandeliers, polished brass handles until her hands ached. She told herself she didn't need that man, didn't need the strange, dangerous pull of his world. Yet every time she walked past the skyscraper lobby, her chest tightened. Every time she heard a faint laugh echo from the upper floors, she wondered if it was him. And every night, lying awake in her small Harlem apartment, she heard her mama's voice whispering in memory, "Don't run from the truth, baby. Face it head on." The truth was simple. She missed him. Not the CEO, not the billionaire. Him. The man who laughed in disbelief when she cornered him. The man who admitted, in a whisper, that he didn't know if he was playing to win or just not to lose. The man who, behind all that steel and glass, was human. The gossip in the building grew louder, more poisonous. One evening, Althea overheard two executives near the elevators. "Her's already looking into her. The boss has lost it. Can't believe he's throwing away credibility over a maid. Pathetic." Their words stabbed, but she kept walking, her head high. If there was one thing her mama taught her, it was not to let other people's smallness shrink her. Still, she knew she couldn't ignore this forever. Something had to give. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon. Vincent was in the middle of a tense meeting with the board when a senior partner, gray-haired and smug, leaned forward and said, "Vincent, this situation with the cleaning staff is unacceptable. The shareholders are nervous. If you don't end it, we'll be forced to question your leadership." A ripple of murmurs spread across the table. Vincent's jaw tightened. His empire was on the line, the very thing he had built his entire life around. But in that moment, staring at their narrow, expectant faces, he realized something. He didn't care. He pushed his chair back, stood tall, and said coldly, "Gentlemen, if your definition of leadership is avoiding being challenged, then maybe I'm not the leader you want." Meeting adjourned. And with that, he walked out, leaving the board stunned. That evening, Althea was finishing her shift when she heard her name. "Althea," she turned. Vincent was standing in the lobby. Not in his suit, not with his entourage, just him, in a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up. Her heart skipped. "What are you doing down here? I needed to see you." His voice was raw, unguarded. "I don't care what they say. I don't care about the whispers, the board, the headlines. The truth is," he stepped closer, lowering his voice, "I need you." She swallowed hard, her chest aching. "Vincent, I know I started this as a joke," he cut in. "But it stopped being funny the moment you beat me. You've shown me something no one else ever dared. You've shown me I don't always have to win to be alive." Althea blinked, her throat tight. "I don't want another game," he said. "I want another chance, with you." Silence filled the lobby. Even the security guards pretended to busy themselves, sneaking glances with wide eyes. Althea's heart thundered. Every instinct told her to run, to protect herself. But deep down, she knew her mama would be smiling right now, proud that her daughter wasn't letting fear steal her future. She lifted her chin. "If you're serious, Vincent, then prove it." His brow furrowed. "How? Not with words, not with money, with action. Show me you're willing to step off your throne." The following Monday, the building buzzed with disbelief, because there, in the lobby of Harlow International, was Vincent Harlow on his knees, mop in hand, scrubbing the marble floor alongside Althea. Executives gawked. Assistants froze. Cameras flashed from smartphones. Vincent ignored them all. He looked up at Althea with a crooked smile. "How am I doing?" She shook her head, fighting back a laugh. "Terrible, you missed a spot." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the whispers, the stares, the world itself faded. It was just the two of them. Weeks passed. The scandal the board had feared never materialized. In fact, the opposite happened. News outlets picked up the story of the billionaire CEO, humbled by a maid's brilliance. Headlines blared, "Chess Queen humiliates Wall Street titan. Vincent Harlow learns humility and love from an unlikely teacher." Far from tanking his reputation, it humanized him. Investors respected his willingness to be challenged. Employees admired his newfound humility. And through it all, he and Althea kept playing. Not just on the chessboard, but in life. He introduced her to worlds she'd never seen. She grounded him in truths he'd long forgotten. Together, they built something neither had expected, a partnership of equals. One evening, months later, they sat in his penthouse, the board once again between them. Althea leaned back after a move, smirking. "Check." Vincent studied the board, then looked up at her with a grin. "You know, one of these days, I might actually beat you." She raised an eyebrow. "Maybe, but that's not the point." He tilted his head. "Then what is?" She reached across the board, taking his hand in hers. "The point is, you don't have to win every battle to win what matters." His chest tightened as he squeezed her hand, and for the first time in his life, Vincent Harlow realized he had finally won something worth more than every deal. Every merger, every dollar, he'd won her heart.